Welcome to Careless Coder. I'm wearing my dungarees, or my redneck uniform as we call it. That only means one thing: we're going to be playing with silicone and resin. The sticky stuff. I like the sticky stuff. Motherfucker! So up till about 10 years ago I was a performing mentalist, and I had my own show and created my own effects. And I had this effect where I forced a dice roll to be a certain number. Now, one of my befriended magician friends asked me, can you make another set of these dice for me? And I was like, yeah, sure. As I go through all my molds, it turned out I threw away that die mold. So we have to create a new die mold. And since it also involves some electronics, I figured you guys may love to look over my shoulder and perhaps learn something how magicians do the dirty, tricky stuff.
I start by marking the magnets, because I need to know which way is north and south in order to attract it to the magnet in the table. Now I use some plastiline for my base, and this time I tried forcing the die in. I regretted that. I had a parting line that I had to fix. And I used some leftover styrene to make a mold box. I use a silicone stylus to create a few mold registrations so that the mold fits together nicely. And now I mix the silicone. This is Platsil 25 from Mold Life. It's a very nice multi-purpose silicone that I also use for special effects wounds. Now I pour it slowly from a height because I don't have a pressure pot, so I will definitely catch some of these nasty air bubbles. I hope many will rise out, but yeah, it's pretty sure I will catch a bubble. So now I dig out the clay so we can pour the second half. In order to not have the silicone second half stick to the silicone, we need this release agent. We're going to be liberal with it. And you can also create your own release agent by using petroleum jelly and dilute it with some benzene, naphtha. And I use it in this case because I have some gaps between the silicone and the mold wall. So I want to drizzle something in to make sure that it will not stick on there either. I glue two matches on top of the die. One will be the pour spout that we will use a syringe to inject the resin into, and one is the air vent to push out the air that we introduce when we inject it. Then we pour the second half, again very gently from a height to reduce the number of bubbles. And then we wait 45 minutes for it to cure. I pull out the spout and the air vent by gently pulling up, so we use a tiny bit of glue. And this is Polyform polyurethane resin. I use this stuff a lot, it's really cool. I pour each component in its own little cup and use syringes to actually measure out the quantity. And here I pour the first layer, the first millimeter, in that bottom side where we put the magnet on. I'm sure I don't catch a bubble here. And then I put in that magnet. Then I fill up my syringe and inject the whole mold. And I'm pretty sure we have a bubble. So the first mold, demold it. And yeah, we got a bubble. As expected, and we can fix that with epoxy clay. I break off the spouts, give it a little sand, also to get rid of that little parting line that I introduced with my little experiment, so that it's nice and smooth. Here I use that epoxy clay, I just put it into the little bubble and feather it out, and you won't see anything, especially after a little sand. Now we prime the die and we paint the die. And then I hand paint the pips. If you go a bit out of the little indentation, you just rub it off. As simple as that. Now usually you wouldn't actually paint the die itself. You would put pigment into the resin. Then it's completely black and it's easy to dot it. But since the client wanted dies that looked Victorian, a little cast iron look, I decided to actually paint them, and that's when you get these sort of things. And now it's time for the electronics that we will be hiding in a table. We have an electromagnet, a big ass electromagnet that pulls 60 kilograms, and we're going to make a little wooden mount to hide this under the table. And here is that little cradle, and I screw the electromagnet in between the tabletop and the little cradle. I use an off-the-shelf wireless relay. You can buy these off Banggood, and I have a lot of these. So I had to hack this board because they used the common of the relay to actually switch the incoming power, so the power that powers this module. But this module takes 12 volts, maximum of 12 volts, and I'm going to switch 24 volts between these 2 points. So I had to cut this wire, or this trace basically, that's what you see. You do that with a soldering iron. Relocated the plus for the module to the pin above, that's correct. And now when I click on, basically there's a connection between these two, and that's this black wire and this white wire. We want all these parts easily removable so we can collapse the table and we can fix these components if they may break. And we use Velcro tape. This stuff is really strong. And then I will run the wires, and basically what we will be doing is we have 2 of these 12-volt batteries in series for the electromagnet, and we will use one in parallel to power the wireless relay. So there's a lot of woodwork here to run the cables and being unseen. And even if you want to disguise it even better, you can make a board that fits over here and over there and hide it completely. That's what we used to do in the TV show, because there we had to lift it up onto the stage and people could look actually underneath it. But in this case that won't be necessary. So this is the remote control, right? This is the negative for the remote control. This is the negative from the battery. This is the positive of the remote control that feeds basically 12 volts, because the remote can only go up to 12 volts. Then we have this wire, so putting this in series with this, and then we have the switching wire from that remote that goes into here, into here, and then the negative goes back to there. So basically this is 24 volts, and this is the series that sits in line with this plus wire of the 24 volts. First test, off, on, yes. That's the one that doesn't throw a 1, yeah. And this should throw a 1. Yes, it's working. And off. And on. Look, yeah. It's working. So the wiring loom is now nicely glued in place behind all these struts, natural struts of the table. So they are hidden from the spectator's view. Now these black wires won't show up, but the red is something that you actually would see in the blue maybe. So that's why we run them parallel to all the struts of the table. And the fact that these slots are in between the little wooden planks gives the illusion that there is nothing hidden underneath. Look here. It's like there is nothing underneath this table. That's the cool part. It is actually here, but since mainly stage floors are also black, it doesn't show up. So the idea is that it's completely fair. And the refraction of the ball actually hides that hardly visible thing right here even further.
So there you have it. We created our own magic prop that forces a certain number on a die or avoids that number altogether depending on the polarity of the magnet in the table and the magnet in the die. We learned how to mold a die using silicone. Then we learned that if we pour down a layer on the opposite side and we put a magnet in, it either avoids that side or forces that number. So that's kind of cool. We use an off-the-shelf little RF433 wireless relay. And this is what we did when we created props for the next Uri Geller as well. We just used off-the-shelf components in order to make a whole new magic prop in only about 6 days time that we had before we went live. And that's the only way that you can actually manage it. Otherwise you have to create all this stuff from scratch. You don't have the time. I created this system 14 years ago and used it 2 years in my own show. And then I sold it off to a Belgian mentalist who then recommissioned me to make this set for him again as he sold it off to another mentalist. So that's kind of funny. So that's cool. And ironically, I saw Darren Brown use this on his Dick Brain routine, where he had audience members throw 2 dice, combine that into a 2-digit number, and he would then reach into a bowl of rice and pick out that number of rice grains. That is a really nice little way to use this force system. So yeah, it's very versatile for us mentalists. I will probably make some more mentalism props because I got reinvigorated with this commission. So I definitely will revisit some more of my own effects that I have embellished and can embellish now even more with the advance in technology in these last 10 years. So yeah, I hope you learned something and I hope to see you in the next one. Stel je eens voor dat je naam zo pakt. Kijk nou, gooi hem weg. Voorbij de muur, voorbij de hemel, atmosfeer uit. Kijk maar, verder en verder en verder. Helemaal verdwenen tot hij weg is. Je naam is weg. Als ik nu vraag wat is je naam, blijf maar eens kijken. Wat is je naam? Bas. Bas, juist.